So I'm going to start this by just asking you something. If you're walking along, just imagine this for a moment. You're walking along a country path, and you look down, and just a few inches away from a foot, you see a snake. Okay? What would that? Just take them out. I'm not going to ask you to say it, but just tune in to what would that be like for you. Just imagine yourself in that situation. So now I'm just going to talk about, stress response. So this is what goes on. So what actually happens is when we see that, here's the snake, here's our eye. So from the visual cortex, we send two messages. We send one to the prefrontal cortex, which gives us a slower, fuller analysis of what the situation is. And we send one to the hippocampus for an immediate threat evaluation. And what the hippocampus will do is activate the amygdala. And the amygdala is about beginning to get our body ready for dealing with the stress. So it's quite quick, very, quick and dirty sometimes, this process. And the amygdala will signal to the hypothalamus that we need to release certain hormones into the bloodstream. One of these is adrenaline, and the adrenaline gets our body ready. Okay, so our pupils dilate. It's about sort of our digestion stops, our lungs expand, etc., etc. It prepares our body. The other hormone that's released is something called cortisol. Now, cortisol, actually, the reason why it's released is concerned with clotting blood and healing wounds. That's why it was released into the body. But the thing about cortisol is it can re-stimulate the amygdala. So what can happen is that it heightens awareness and it can re-stimulate the amygdala. The other thing it does is it suppresses the functioning in our prefrontal cortex and also in our hippocampus. So these are the more reasoning bits that can that actually we can work things through. So these are suppressed, these are blocked. So if we think about it, you might be in a position where in the past your boss has come into the room, slammed a report down on your desk and told you it's rubbish and how come you haven't done a better job, and you're sitting there going, and you can't think, your mind's in a whirl. Well, that's because cortisol has been released and the more reasoning capacities, our more integrative capacities are shut down. So really the point is that unless there's not another threat, unless we don't experience another threat, it will take our bodies 3 to 5 minutes to reabsorb cortisol. However, if we do experience another threat, this will keep going. And by the way, it's not just our eyes seeing a snake that can be seen as a threat in this sense. A negative thought can also activate this same process. So what this means is, I see a snake, my body, I go into this stress response. I ready myself to run away. I get away from it, and I'm thinking, oh, there's a snake. What if there are more snakes around here? So you can see I'm beginning to start thinking, and what if I got bitten by one? And where would I go to? And I'm out in the middle of the country. So I can really keep that process going. Now, if we think about that from a TA perspective, what are we talking about? I would suggest actually what we're talking about is actually we're talking about elements within the racket system. Irrespective of what you want to call this stress response, You know, you could call it anger, fear, sadness, etc. These are our racket feelings, but this is actually what's going on in the body, right? When we're using those, those script beliefs and our reinforcing memories to keep that racket going, this is what we're doing. So I think if we're thinking about mindfulness, I think mindfulness can be a really great way of getting us out, cutting through a racket.